Today, we will be discussing a key theme from Chapter 8 of Limitless. The Federal Reserve Takes on a New Age of Crisis by Jonah. This chapter examines how the role of the Federal Reserve has evolved, particularly during the periods of economic instability, and raises important questions about the scope and limits of its power. At its core, this chapter explores a fundamental shift, the transformation of the Federal Reserve from a reactive institution into a proactive force that increasingly shapes the trajectory of the economy. To begin, it is important to understand the traditional role of the Federal Reserve. Established to promote economic stability, the Fed has historically been tasked with maintaining price stability, supporting maximum employment, and ensuring the functioning of financial systems. Its primary tools, such as adjusting interest rates and providing liquidity to banks, were designed to influence the economy in broad, indirect ways. However, Smielek explains these conventional tools have proven insufficient during the moments of severe crisis. This became particularly evident during the 2008 financial crisis, when the collapse of major financial institutions threatened the entire global economy. In response, the Federal Reserve has begun to expand its toolkit in unprecedented ways. This expansion did not end in 2008. Instead, it laid the groundwork for an even more dramatic transformation during the COVID-19 crisis in 2020. By that point, the Federal Reserve had not only developed new tools, but had also redefined its approach to the crisis management. One of the central arguments in Chapter 8 is that the Federal Reserve no longer waits for crisis to fully unfold before taking action. Instead, it has adopted a more anticipatory stance. In earlier periods, the Fed typically intervened only after clear signs of economic distress, such as bank failures, market crashes, or severe contractions in lending. Its role was largely reactive, to stabilize a system that had already begun to break down. In contrast, the modern Federal Reserve increasingly acts in advance of such outcomes. Policymakers now attempt to identify vulnerabilities early and intervene preemptively to prevent widespread damage. This shift reflects a broader change in economic thinking, one that prioritizes prevention over response. While this proactive approach can mitigate the severity of crisis, it also raises important questions. Acting early requires making judgments under uncertainty. It involves deciding which risks are significant enough to warrant intervention, and which sectors of the economy should receive support. A key mechanism enabling this expanded role is the Federal Reserve's Emergency Lending Authority, particularly under Section 13(3) of the Federal Reserve Act. This provision allows the Fed to extend credit during unusual and exigent circumstances. For much of its history, this authority was rarely used. However, during the 2008 financial crisis, it became a critical tool for stabilizing the financial system. The Fed used it to provide liquidity not only to the traditional bankers, but also to the broader ranges of financial institutions and markets. By 2020, the use of these emergency powers had reached an entirely new scale. In response to the economic shock caused by the pandemic, the Federal Reserve implemented a series of programs designed to support corporate debt markets, municipal governments, and the other key sectors of the economy. These interventions were both rapid and expansive, reflecting a willingness to decisively in the face of uncertainty. Smialek emphasizes that while these actions were legally grounded, they represented a significant departure from the Fed's historical role. The institution was no longer simply backstopping the banking system. It was actively shaping outcomes across a wide range of economic domains.
This leads to one of the most important concerns raised in Chapter 8, the issue of accountability. The Federal Reserve operates with a high degree of independence from political institutions. This independence is generally seen as beneficial, as it allows policymakers to make decisions based on economic conditions rather than short-term political pressures. However, as the Fed's influence expands, so too does the importance of public understanding and oversight. He points out that the complexity of the Fed's actions can make them difficult for the general public to fully grasp. This creates a disconnect between the institution's growing power and the public's ability to evaluate its decisions. In a democratic society, this gap represents a challenge. If citizens don't understand how key economic decisions are being made or who benefits from them, it becomes more difficult to ensure accountability. Another critical theme in this chapter is the uneven impact of the Federal Reserve's interventions. Traditional monetary policy, such as adjusting interest rates, tends to affect the economy broadly. While its effects are not perfectly uniform, they are generally dispersed across different sectors and groups. In contrast, the targeted interventions described in Chapter 8 can have more concentrated effects. Programs designed to stabilize specific markets, such as corporate bonds or municipal debt, inevitably benefits certain sectors more directly than others. As a result, the Federal Reserve's actions can influence not only the overall stability of the economy, but also the distribution of economic outcomes. Some industries may recover more quickly due to direct support, while others may lag behind. This raises important questions about fairness and the appropriate scope of central bank intervention. Should an unelected institution play such a significant role in determining economic winners and losers? And if so, how should these decisions be guided? These concerns culminate in the central question posted by Smialek. Is there a limit to what the Federal Reserve can do? During the COVID-19 crisis, Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell suggested that the Fed's capacity to act is extensive, particularly when supported by the U.S. Treasury. This statement reflects a broader recognition that the boundaries of central banking have expanded considerably. The idea of a limitless Federal Reserve is very powerful and unsettling. On one hand, it suggests that policymakers have the tools necessary to prevent catastrophic economic collapse. But on the other hand, it raises concerns about overreach and the concentration of economic power in a single institution. Determining where to draw the line is not a straightforward task. It involves balancing the need for decisive action in times of crisis with the principles of accountability, transparency, and democratic governance. So, in conclusion, Chapter 8 of Limitless highlights a pivotal transformation in the role of the Federal Reserve. The institution has evolved from a reactive stabilizer into a proactive and highly influential force within the economy. Its expanded use of emergency powers, its willingness to intervene across a wide range of markets, and its growing role in shaping economic outcomes all reflect this shift. At the same time, though, these developments introduce new challenges. Questions of accountability, public understanding, and the distributional effects of policy decisions have become increasingly important. Ultimately, the chapter invites us to reconsider what we expect from central banks and how we ensure that their actions align with broader societal goals. As the Federal Reserve continues to navigate future crises, the issue will not simply be whether it can act, but how and under what constraints it should. Thank you.